TALK REWIND, a podcast series by Luxembourg Art Week. This series revisits the art talk that took place at the fair, where partners and guests explored key questions shaping contemporary artistic creation and the art market. CAT, collecting artistic things, the drive to create and the desire to collect, in collaboration with Casino Luxembourg.
Good afternoon. Thank you for being here this afternoon. In the name of Casino, I'd like to welcome you to this talk and welcome also Nora and Vincent, our guests this afternoon. Nora, Cristea and Vincent Schneider are curators of an exhibition at Casino at this moment, an exhibition called EAT, which is a play on the platform that they're running, an online platform that is called Contemporary Artist Things, and the acronym is CAT. So we went from the CAT acronym to define the name of the exhibition, which is EAT. I'll let them develop this further afterwards. Just to give you a bit of context about Nora and Vincent, they are curators, of course, of this platform and of various projects and exhibitions, but they also have different activities, backgrounds in the idea of design, of accompanying artist development, of gallery activities, of game development, of publication design, many layers of skills and engagement and commitment. And it was really a pleasure to work with you on the exhibition, to develop all of this. The exhibition is composed of artist edition, multiples, objects, so things that can be bought in the exhibition. It's a first also for Casino that we connect with a platform that is commercial, so to say, and that the works that are exhibited at Casino can be bought, but it's an interesting experience. It provokes interesting discussions and ideas also. And I'm very happy that you're here with us this weekend, that you came back and that you took the time to make this talk and to continue the discussions that we initiated. So I wish you a nice talk. Thank you.
A big thank you to you, Kevin, and also to the Casino, giving us the opportunity and the space, showing what we have to offer, our solutions maybe, our thoughts on distribution of art. The coming presentation will also be about our thoughts of distribution and art. We will be pretty art historic with our example, but we hope that you will enjoy it. And also big thank you to the Lux Art Week for giving us this space and the possibility to talk to you all, and happy to see you all here.
Yeah, Kevin introduced us already a bit, but before we get started with everything, we wanted to introduce ourselves.
My name, as said, is Nora Cristea. I was born in Bucharest. I'm based in Berlin now. Back in the day, I studied communication design and art history. My work now focuses mainly on helping artists to develop their own ways of communicating their art or their practice, positioning their work, mostly durch various formats, websites, books, portfolios. I additionally teach postgraduate artists at Goldraus Künstlerinnenprojekt. This is a non-profit organization for helping postgraduate artists to learn how to be or to start their art business in their perspectives. Additionally, I design and conceptualize artist monographs. And as said, together with Vincent, I run our online store platform, CAT.
And I'm Vincent Schneider. I also studied communication design. That's also exactly where we met during our studies. My minor was philosophy. And after studying, I worked in the blue chip gallery business for 7 years. In that time, my side gig, my side job was co-curating an exhibition space in Cologne, Ungefähr 5. It's a non-profit off space that focused on providing the chance for emerging artists to get their first solo exhibition outside of university. And now I mainly work as a concept artist and designer for the entertainment industry. So I work on pre-production for video games and movies. And we work together on CAT. And we both live and work in Berlin.
So let's start with an overview. Today, we'd like to present you a brief overview on our perspective on making and mostly collecting art. I have a big disclaimer. This is very important for me to say. It's mostly pretty Eurocentric. We decided to keep it this way because, it illustrates particularly well how consumerist society developed, which is for us important to identify better solutions for the future. We first will start by defining different ways of collecting art. So we go into the perspective of the collector, and we will start from paleo art to contemporary art, contemporary situations. Then we will look what collecting and creating mean today in our Western society, in our consumerist society. And finally, and we'd like to invite you to talk with us later about this, we will reflect on future solutions, especially about creating fairer platforms for selling art, with centering the artist and inviting collectors from all classes.
Yeah. To think about these proposals of solutions, we would like to first have a look at the customer, so to say, the collector. A collector is someone who values objects not for their practical use, but for another kind of meaning that could be cultural, aesthetic, historical, personal, or even economic. And sometimes it's also about status or about a well-hidden secret behind the collected item. And collecting, as far as we believe, can amplify and shift the meaning of an object, can be supportive, preserving, sometimes even harmful or exploitative. It can arise from a personal obsession or sometimes a strategic calculation. For us, it's really interesting to look at the earliest form of collecting. What we see here is the Makapansgat cobble, which is a tiny jasperate pebble that has a face or even two faces, and it dates back to 3 million years before present. And this is an earliest example of a manoport. That's the term we use for it. And it's basically a natural object that has been carried by early human ancestors without having a practical use. So it's not food, it's not a tool, but it's something that they felt connected to by emotion. And what is interesting about these findings is that this Makapansgat cobble was found in a Australopithecus africanus dig site, and the stone's material, the jasperite, does not occur naturally in that dig site, but only 32 kilometers away. So it has been definitely carried, and it has definitely been with Australopithecus africanus for quite some time. Possibly makes it the earliest known example of collecting in human evolution. And it's important to note the creator here was not a Hominian artist, but it was just shaped by nature. And the collector possibly recognized a value in it. These are tiny shells of sea snails, and they date back to 30,000 years and have been found 40 kilometers away from the Mediterranean Sea. And the hunter-gatherers back then collected objects not only for survival, but for aesthetic reasons as well. And these have been manipulated. They drilled holes in them and they wore them necklaces around and carried them also to be used as a form of currency back then.
It's pre-economic and also something working without symbolic meaning for trading, for example, but also status. Variety of expressions started to evolve. People began marking things they found, making them their own. In South Africa, humans scratched symbols on these ostrich eggs 60,000 years ago, right? These are some of the earliest known engraved designs that show mark making and that show the first creative process. We are not sure what they are for. Some say they were water containers. So we can see the engravings maybe are ownership marks or symbolic and decorative. We will go away from the historic context because these eggs inspired one idea in me that I want to communicate. Because what is striking about these fragments, they resemble one another in design, but differ in color and executions slightly. And seen through my eyes, to modern eyes, right? For me, they appeared like the component of a series. So when I saw them, I felt a little bit of greed. I wanted to see them all, to catch them all. So objects that become collectibles simply through the way they relate and fit to each other can be, found like very, very, very long time ago. And this is a way of assigning value to categorization. We will talk a little bit more about this later. And series thinking, right? And this mirrors a lot of how Western collectors have long imposed their own values in historical and especially ethnological artworks, often redefining the object by positioning themselves as authors of a collection and kind of diminishing the original creator's ownership. Let's go to Greece, to ancient Greece. After Alexander the Great's campaign, enormous, and I say really enormous amount of Persian treasure entered Greek territory. It was mainly gold, silver vessels, textual luxury objects, and for me, what's mainly heard for ceremonial items, ripped out of their context for decoration. They were taken from Persepolis, Susa, other imperial centers of those time. Well, this period now marks one of the earliest documented cases of cross-cultural value transfer through appropriation, redistribution of conquered treasure, and this pattern carries on into our time, sadly. And it impacts a lot of marginalized artists. But here, from this problem, inspired the first solution we want to present to you, and this is visibility. For us, ethical collecting begins with transparency, openly acknowledging creators and the conditions under which artworks are made or acquired.
And we're staying in Greece in the Hellenistic period. Collecting became widespread across different layers in Greek society. Artists of that time tried to play into the new taste by appropriating and reimagining imported Persian luxuries mentioned before. These deeply influenced the Greek collector's taste. Archaeology shows that there's a mass distribution of previously rare objects after Alexander's conquest, indicating that there was a flourishing market for that. This also generated the first famous artists' early collecting fashions, where the Greek society was really keen on collecting signatures or manuscripts by statesmen, philosophers, artists, and poets, kind of to show off that there's a certificate behind their possession. What we see here in that slide are two examples of so-called tanagra figurines. These are made out of terracotta and are a first example of mass-produced collectible art sculptures. Back then they were sold on public markets, not only in elite settings, but they were affordable enough for the ordinary Greek household. And their production involved molds, so they allowed for serial production. Basically, modern multiples of figurines and editions come really close to that.
I have to add that those were before made of bronze and marble and extremely expensive. But everybody wanted to have a figurine like that. So the market kind of changed a little bit to make it out of terracotta, make it more accessible for everybody.
Because there was a demand.
And molds, yes.
And that leads us to our proposal, solution number 2, which is provide affordable entry points. And this is a practical approach to affordability that lies in adjusting scale, material, in case of editions, also the production time. This model, which is also implemented in our practice in our shop, reduces the financial risk for both collectors and artists. And we believe that everybody then benefits from greater affordability and easier access.
Yes, it is a starting point, but it's a good one. So this is a personal thing, but we really like the idea of art as a wearable. So everybody knows intaglio, right? They're still popular today. And it was another widely spread object of desire in Hellenistic periods, I think inspired by Egyptian art. These are engraved gemstones, and they were regarded as jewelry, but less as jewelry, as more as miniature work of arts. And some people wore it as personal sigil, right? They were primarily luxury items, so they were not for everyone, available for everyone. The materials were extremely costly, they were imported. You had to have expertise, of course, to carve into gemstones like this, right? Those gemstones did not democratize collecting in the way the Tanagra figures before that we saw did, but they really reveal another aspect that we find interesting and we want to communicate. As I said before, spread visibility of both art and artists by being worn. I really like the idea. I think their value amplifies through social exchange and this interpersonal transmission, almost like a word-to-mouth propaganda. We have this a lot in our pieces that we said it. For example, Vincent is wearing a shawl, and people talk about it, and we get to know the artist, right? Which brings us to solution 3 of 9, art as everyday culture. Pieces that circulate, live with people, and gain meaning. I wanted shortly to talk about psychology of collecting, and I didn't know how. And then I remembered there are crazy Romans killing each other for copies of Greek art. So let me introduce you to this fact. After the Roman conquests of Greece, Greek sculpture, painting, luxury goods, like the Greeks stole from the Persian, the Romans did to the Greece, entered Rome, the Roman Empire, in a massive scale. And Rome absorbed this culture pretty one-to-one, importing enormous quantities of Greek art. It became a status symbol for Roman elites and late Republican emperors. Well, there was not so much Greek art available as those all imperial bosses wanted. So large-scale productions of replicas started. These copies were still expensive, even though they were replicas. So they didn't make art more accessible in any way. And the booming market additionally encouraged fraud. But this early hype and collecting craze lead us to a brief look of psychology of collecting. Because collecting became then entangled with corruption, exploitation, violence. As villas, bars, and public buildings were filled with art to display power, taste, and cultural superiority, the decadence and the obsessions of the collectors led to intense competition, in some cases turned violent. So there are some deaths for stealing art collections. Art collecting still functions as a status performance, right, in many ways. The Roman obsession with Greek art created a centralization of taste, which made the art market then more aggressive. So, this canonization erased other creators from that time. They were obsessed with the Greeks, so local artists, artistic traditions could not properly develop. As of today, a small set of powerful collectors, galleries, and institutions still kind of shape taste, visibility, and market value. So this leads us to solution 4, cultivate and create space for living artists. Roman history shows us that when art appreciation is merely a status performance, rather than, artist-centered cultivation, development in the artist community is stunted. Sustainable culture development requires room for new ideas and experiments, right? Prioritizing living artists, young artists, emerging artists, forces innovation and reduces the dominance of, speculative, market-driven narratives.
So we enter the Middle Ages, and with the fall of the Roman Empire, the wealth that once supported many art forms collapsed. And what we saw in the Middle Ages is that art and relics became mainly centered in Christianity, and became a spiritual capital. And European emperors and rulers started building treasuries and vaults filled with gold coins, crowns, and jewelry as a financial resource. And in stark contrast, back then, the peasants normally lived with minimal possessions, utilitarian items, tools, clothing, perhaps some pieces of furniture. So this leads us to talk about our proposed solution number 5, decentralized cultural demand and access. Back then, obviously, there was only one collector, so to say, the richest and the most powerful one.
The church, right?
And that created extreme inequality in access. And by diversifying access, we believe we can create a healthier cultural ecosystem with multiple voices shaping culture.
Who doesn't know the Medicis, right? Renaissance in Italy, especially in Florence, grew rich through banking, trade, commerce. So finally, after the Dark Ages, as we say, collecting re-emerged, now tied more to learning, taste, culture, identity. And I think the Medici family, they became a key example of the early collectors. Artists decorated their palaces, chapels, villas. Inventories were carefully maintained, and the collection became a part of their identity, prestige, self-representation. In return, the family members, and this is important, I think, acted as patrons or intermediaries between artists, scholars, and political powers. Buying art or funding artists showed refinement, education, and civic pride. So a patronage culture began to emerge. It was the new status performance, maybe also not bound only to collecting or to objects, right? So the collecting expanded beyond nobility at this time. We had merchants and urban bourgeois that were able to decorate their house with arts. And I think this marks one of the first historical shifts towards broader, though still limited, because you had to have to be rich, right? Cultural access. But from this, we established our 6th solution, patronage and fostered long-term collectors and artist relationship. I think stable support from a person, from an institution, allows the artists to experiment, innovate, build their careers, safety nets, right? And patrons, on the other hand, right, they benefit from artistic production, but also cultural prestige. There is something behind it. Today, individuals or companies, foundations or communities can buy, but also fund studio spaces or give monthly financial support. There are websites like Patreon, for example, or create platforms or network hubs for artists, or dinners for people to meet from different sections of society. Unlike collected pieces, commissions were individual work created for a specific person or occasion. Holbein's The Ambassadors was not produced for a church or a monarch. It was made for a private residence. And this leads us to a chapter that's very important to us. The next chapter will discuss display of objects in greater detail.
Yeah, and now we enter the age of curiosity, an age where science and exploration became more prevalent. That is painting by Franz Fracken of a Kunst- und Raritätenkammer von 1636. And it shows one of these Wunderkammern or cabinet of curiosities in the front. In the background to the right, you see a group of scholars examining a book. So in that time, the access to knowledge increased, and means to display the world and its wonders were needed. And these Wunderkammern functioned as early private museums in a small scale, and also were as a powerful status symbol. So they presented objects from they were really rare or strange or had an interesting origin or potentially a story behind it. And these collections then encouraged viewers to make more connections across art, science, nature, and culture. these small still lifes that you see in the Wunderkammern were reflecting the growing desire to display and frame and elevate objects. And that leads us to our proposed solution number 7, platform without rigid hierarchies. So we think that every object of art deserves the same attention within the same context. So it embraces the diversity of objects and perspectives, suggesting the inclusive curatorial approaches. So everything has an equal weight within the same context. So back then, the cabinets of curiosity, they were bringing together different disciplines as well. So it was not only art, it was also biology, geology, and archaeology, emphasizing that there is a marvel of wonder in things that connects them all. And these exhibitions and of collection encourage the viewer to see the whole collection as a artwork of its own in its entirety.
Wunderkammern created early social spaces for people from diverse backgrounds, where they gathered and could talk about the art, the object, and knowledge, what they see and interpret in this exposition. And this incorrect discourse created communities, maybe also a very early form of cultural engagement. The spirit of curiosity and social interactions laid this groundwork for more accessible environments, especially in Northern Europe and especially in the Netherlands. There was the Dutch Golden Age. People became rich and a highly open commercialized art market emerged. The economic prosperity was so broad that even middle-class families, not just the elite, could buy art for their homes. That had many reasons, not only the prosperity, but also there was Calvinism, which, stripped churches of iconography, images, so people had a desire to start collecting, which lead to mass production in art. And dealers' auctions and early art fairs made those works available. So this shift marks a key transition from private Wunderkammern, small collections, people were meeting, talking about what they all find in the world, to the beginning of public open exhibitions, auctions, accessible art markets, which leads us to solution 8, build community, create events.
That's why we're here.
Drawing from the example of both the Wunderkammer and the early Dutch market, we see that strong artistic cultures grow when people gather, like we do here, talk, and share experiences, around the objects, around the object creators, around the ideas behind them. And forming social networks with people not only who share similar interests can create a larger hub for opportunities. And that's what we want. We want connection. We want future projects. We want to grow. So open studio talks, artist dinners, guided tours, collaborative exhibitions all help, to diversify art, to welcome new people, and also let visitors participate, not just to observe.
What we see in the slide here to describe the visual is a painting by Hans Jordens. It's a Kunstkammer from 1660. And what is interesting to mention about the painting is that to the left, there's an open window. And beneath the windowsill, there's a globe and scholars examining. So this is a allegory for the Dutch market being a global and open market.
Cataloging can be a platform. Science can be a platform. And I want to briefly talk about this practice. This engraving is by Salomon Kleiner, and his work became very valued 100 years later because of this exceptional accuracy. His engraving suddenly became crucial for art historians. This image functions as a kind of graphic catalog, allowing scholars to reconstruct, the collections and identify objects and keep art history precise, which I find extremely important. So this example shows how cataloging, whether it's written or visual, can also be a form of platforming. As we have learned, diversity in art is essential. the more different kinds of artworks are documented and preserved, the more future artists and researchers can understand history in all its variety without erasure. Collecting can be a form of cataloging, of course. A collection can be art historic because it organizes and it preserves artworks, of course. So platforming can be cataloging, as presenting art gives it visibility and context. It's not presented as a solution here, but there are many forms of digital cataloging, which makes it easier to store art, to share art, and to make access, global access. And for example, for me also a very well-led social media account or a very good shop can be a form of cataloging and preserving.
This is kind of the bizarre transition to the 18th century and the beginning of the British Museum through the rise of vast private collections. A prime example of that is Sir Hans Sloane, who with his 71,000 objects that he collected and acquired from other collections later formed the core of the British Museum. Sloane was a physician and an influential figure, and he collected from all over the world through his imperial and colonial networks. He was one of the major Jamaican slave owners, so that's why his legacy and collection is inseparable from systems of exploitation. And that led the British Museum in 2020 to remove his bust from a really prominent position in the museum to a display addressing colonial oppression. Back then, as European elites collected art and natural specimens and tools and cultural artifacts, not only from Europe, but also from the colonialized regions, these objects were often taken under unequal power conditions, shown without credit, erased identity, agency, and the original creators were often forgot, and the object treated more like scientific specimens, transferring the ownership, which is interesting to us, and that transfer of the ownership fully went to the collector. And nowadays it's kind of like going back, yes. And then we jump to the industrialization, and that was a period also of democratizing the access to the art market. What we see here is a page of the handbook to the public galleries of art in and near London by Anna Brownell Jameson. It is a two-volume book, and it was one of the very first how to collect books back then that also included catalogs, images of art, and where the book was about sharing expertise for the public good and helping institutions collect and navigate the art world back then. The rise of such publications then sparked a wave of other publications on how to collect art, making it a mass cultural thing. Of course, industrialization itself transformed collecting as well with mass production. There were new collectibles other than art, other objects. So that expanded from an elite pursuit to a thing that was more global and connected, outside, shaped by the consumer culture. And history teaches us that nothing can flourish freely with someone eventually spoiling the fun in the pursuit of value.
Yes. So as many people began collecting stuff, they grew a lot of criticism, and between they said this is typically how females collect. This is typically how children collect.
Yeah, there was this debate of how a distinguished connoisseur would collect art and how a dilettante collects art. There were a bit of tensions growing in the art collecting field. Yeah, and that leads us to our proposal of a ninth solution. If you want to start collecting, we think you should keep an open mind. So if you have a really rigid taste that is dictated by what everybody believes you should collect, then that can be really limiting. And also sometimes a little bit exclusive, because some artists that were maybe once dismissed or defined as mediocre or below sometimes can be celebrated geniuses years later. So somewhere out there is a work of art you never expected that it will connect with you.
Yes.
Possibly.
Keep an open mind, always. So we finally arrived in the 20th century, the explosion of new movements. Our art historians already know all the names, Fauvism, Cubism, Dada, whatever else is coming up. The challenge was, we need to get the newest form. Innovation itself became a selling point. Now we talk a little bit more about many European artists then gained major success by borrowing motifs and ideas from colonized cultures, made their work appear innovative or modern for European audiences. But, the original artists were not compensated, not cited, not credited. So Europe could profit culturally and financially from traditions that were not their own, partly. Additionally, galleries became power players. Some galleries could turn through their support unknown artists to global stars. Taste making, right? Mainly by museums, also by galleries, and quickly grow in the 20th century. And for example, once a museum acquired an artwork, its value, the artist's reputation, the stories behind it, they skyrocketed. It became the talk of the town, as you say. Also, art fairs globalized the market. Auction houses, we know Sotheby's, Christie's turned artwork into investment assets. So from, let's say, the mid-century onward, art quickly became a global commodity, which led to prices rising dramatically for some works. Speculation entered the art world. Investors increasingly treated art as a financial instrument. And some artists criticized it, but others, like, Warhol, famously embraced it openly, turning the critique of commodification in the very products he sold. So, the century, many of you were alive, ended with a fully globalized and commercial art system. And some few artists became a brand.
Yeah, we would talk longer about that period, of course, but there's so much ground to cover. So, and time is running. So we're moving along quickly. That's something for the kids. Yeah, we just want to talk about this really briefly. And I'm not going to read any of my script because I realize it's about time. To the left, you see the Pokemon Pikachu Illustrator card from 1998. Which was
for the kids now.
Sold for a staggering about $5 million back in 2021 during the pandemic by the infamous Pokemon collector Logan Paul, which to this day stands as a potential waste of money, but is also a really interesting moment in the grading sector, because the Magic card that was sold for $3 million in the same year also only was sold for this staggering amount of money because it was graded by PSA, a grading company in the USA that defines the state of the card as mint, and through that the value of the rarity is also certified. So basically PSA, the company, as a grading institution, kind of functions as a museum, I would say, a museum that gives the work a provenience and thereby through hype as well creates value.
More younger audience also collect pop culture artifacts rather than art.
We also saw that the pandemic had an effect on collectors that were really interested in trading cards as well.
Rediscovering nostalgia, of course, but also looking for the alternative investments, being scared about global financial downfalls, right? All these trends participate in online communities a lot and grow there, so that they find their values also online, in discourse online.
Yes, and that also leads us to something that we have to talk about, and we cannot skip the NFT market. And there was a peak, and that work stands as the peak of the NFT market. That is the every day is the first 5,000 days by Beeple, aka Mike Winkelmann. That work was auctioned for $93 million back then in 2021. There was 42,000 Ether back then. Now the Ether went a bit down, I think, as everybody knows, so it's a little less now. And that work was heavily hyped, and
now it's worth 127 euros.
And the owner, Vignesh Sundaresan, who is known as the Metakovan, he bought the work, but obviously he did not receive the copyright. So it's not entirely his, and he's exhibiting the work in the metaverse, which is publicly accessible. And that leads a bit to a public skepticism towards the art world and its extremes. And on the right, you see a movie still from Tenet from 2020 showing the protagonist of the movie walking through Oslo Freeport. I think it's fictional completely, wherein the antagonist of the movie stores his art and also his illegal weapons that he's about to deal. There's this trope that persists because there's scandals, there's secrecy, and the speculative market often is mirrored in these fictional movies.
Yeah, they reflect a broader, skepticism the public had towards the art world. So let's talk about our solutions. Maybe we can change it. As you remembered, we worked through them in the beginning. We were talking about the solution one, visibility. I said ethical collecting begins with transparency. You have to acknowledge the creator. You have to acknowledge the conditions, not only under how the artwork was made, but also acquired, we think. Then we have solution two, accessible entry points. We were talking about creating affordability through thoughtful choices in maybe scale, maybe production, maybe material, time, right? Can also be a point, which can reduce financial risk for artists and, while giving collectors maybe a achievable, meaningful way to start collecting. Solution three was art as everyday culture. Art gains value when it lives with people, something that I really strongly believe in. Supporting pieces that circulate and integrate into daily life shift away the focus from exclusivity and, towards maybe hopefully a shared cultural experience. Solution four is making space for living, emerging artists. We think that cultural development that is sustainable needs room for new ideas, needs to prioritize living artists, foster their innovation, reduce dominance of speculative, market-driven narratives. Solution 5.
I'm going to solution 5, I'm sorry. So, as it says here, decentralize the cultural demand, so expanding interest beyond major centers and dominant narratives. That creates more space for alternative voices and practices. And the solution 6, we think is really helpful, and we experienced that ourselves, is that if you have a network with artists, it's really healthy to have long-term relationships between collectors and artists and support their artistic growth. And then the number 7 is platform without hierarchies. A fair platform recognizes all media and origins. And solution number 8 is building community through events, which we clearly are doing right now. And our last one, you should stay open-minded when collecting.
Yes, because stay away from the tastemakers.
Yes, be curious about voices that maybe stand outside the norm.
Be intuitive.
Yes.
Some of our proposals we try to implement in our practice, hopefully successfully. CAT, our art platform, is designed to make art accessible through a tool that, many people use daily, an easy to use online shop. Our art platform offers a created program, I would say, of art editions, multiples. We talked about variables and many other formats as of now. Artists in the practice need support on many levels. So we created our own kind of Wunderkammer. We try to listen to our own principles, cataloging without hierarchies, offering artworks in accessible formats, producing small-scale editions with relatively low production cost. And hopefully we offer a way to engage with art at a low financial risk for both artists and collectors. And additionally, we hope to amplify social reach and exchange also via social media and reposting art.
Yeah, what we are happy about to tell you is that in the beginning of next year, in January, we are going to expand our platform and we are going to offer mentorship calls that interested artists can book via our website by one click, and they can talk to either one of us or colleagues from our network, other curators, gallerists. They talk to them for 15 minutes, it's for free, and they basically can ask everything they want to get a bit of advice and maybe some help with their portfolio work. We wanted to talk about what the future holds for art collecting, and this is a movie still from the movie Children of Men from 2006. But within that movie, humanity is on the brink of extinction because they are infertile, and the UK are in a catastrophic state where the Tate Modern has been turned into the Ministry of Arts and is under military protection. And the protagonist's cousin, Nigel, is basically living in there, and it's become the most elitist private apartment filled with art that basically is now in that scenario meaningless and completely disconnected because there's no future. And that movie suggests a future where with the disconnection of society, art actually no longer represents any value at all. And we certainly hope that that does not become the case.
We don't want art to become, private, isolated, emotionally empty, hidden. There's no cultural purpose behind this. So we believe the work of art communicators, maybe that's what we are, or curators, is very important. Well, we tried to be a connective tissue between, artists and collectors and, support the artist's drive to create and the collector's desire to give art a place.
Thank you so much for sticking with us. Our first lecture. Thank you.
Luxembourg Art Week would like to thank all speakers and partners for their commitment to the 2025 Art Talk program. The next edition will take place from November 20 to November 22, 2026. Join us for a new series of captivating conferences and conversation about art, live at the fair and available for replay afterwards.